begin. All right, we are ready.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We've been really excited about speaking about this specific topic. I know many of you are interested in learning some new skills and techniques and just getting to know, the people that you're here for a lot better. So today we're going to be going over social skills with siblings and peers. I'm Monica Reveley. I'm the regional director for MeBe here in Austin, Texas. And I am a BCBA. We're providing in-home ABA services throughout the whole Austin area. So I'm really happy to be here today. And I, been able to collaborate with Chelsea.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea Anstead. I am the social group specialist based out of San Diego. So we are in the process of getting social groups happening. I'm really excited to be presenting on this topic, to be working more closely with Monica. I'm really excited about the cross-country sort of feel to this entire presentation. Apparently, we even have somebody here from New Zealand. So welcome, everybody, in whatever time zone you're in. We're really excited to discuss this topic with you. All right. Oops. Okay.
Okay, so today we're going to go over some strategies. A few strategies we're going to be going over today are going to be strategies for promoting flexibility, independence, coping skills, and cooperation when playing with siblings and peers.
Okay. And then we'll, yeah, sorry, keep going.
I'll go, yeah. Well, we also have some tips for priming, recognizing signs of agitation, encouraging independence, and setting and modifying goals. So let's go over some differences that we see in social skills within the autistic population. So we see some differences with eye contact, conversation, transitions within play and between play activities, in developing and maintaining relationships. So some of the differences that we do see with eye contact, really when we learn about autistic experiences and people's individual experiences with eye contact, we know that it can be overwhelming, or it can be a really uncomfortable feeling for a lot of autistic people. Conversation, we know that happens differently within the autistic community. A common goal that you may see being worked on is back and forth conversations, knowing, how to respond, to a question or how to maintain a conversation. With play transitions, it may be a lot more difficult for an autistic person to transition between activities. And with developing and maintaining relationships, initiating those relationships, knowing how to respond to bids for relationships, those can all be a little bit more difficult, and we see that they look different between different populations. So yeah, some common goals that you might see is back and forth conversations, knowing how to engage in cooperative play, and identifying the likes and dislikes in others so that kids can kind of form and know what to initiate and what kind of games to ask others to play if they know the likes and dislikes of their peers. So let's talk about some expectations. So let's think about autistic experiences and how we can adjust our expectations, knowing that autistic people really do experience socialization very differently. So like I said, eye contact can be very uncomfortable. Some activities are best enjoyed alone, and I think we can all relate to that, knowing that some activities, I prefer to do by myself than to do with others. And we see that, within our autistic kids as well. There may be some things that they just really prefer to play with alone. And just keeping that in mind when trying to facilitate play with others, knowing that some things are better when played with alone and some things may be a better opportunity to play together. Age appropriateness. So we kind of have this idea in mind of what activities are appropriate for different ages. But I really want to kind of challenge you to think beyond ages and think that, within the autistic population, there may be some specific interests or games that are preferred to play that are not necessarily age appropriate, but are really big interests for that specific person. And knowing that expectations can change over time. So, something that may have been difficult in the past may now in the present or in the future may change, and, being flexible with our expectations.
Okay, and this is me. So we've got a little bit of comparison between siblings and peers. I know that especially over COVID, lines have been a little blurry and maybe access to peers has been a little bit challenging. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to cover what might be similar and what might be different between interactions with siblings versus interactions with peers. So you can probably guess your child's relationship with their siblings is extremely complex, a lot more complex than it's ever going to be with their neighbors or their classmates. Interactions with siblings are much more likely to involve caregivers, just because it's really likely they're going to pull out sorry while you're in the kitchen. Maybe they'll play in the dining room. They're going to ask you, hey, can we play on the Switch? They're naturally going to involve you in a lot of the different things that they do. And finally, siblings are just around each other infinitely more than neighbors and classmates are. You might actually find yourself needing to encourage time apart from siblings, or encourage them to maybe spread out, take up a little bit more space apart. And that's definitely, sometimes it's actually the opposite of what you want them to do with their peers. So for interactions with peers, your child might express a little bit more flexibility. They don't really have a history of, getting in a fight with their peer like they did with their sister. They're a little bit more wary of crossing lines, hurting somebody's feelings, or, decreasing the likelihood that their friend is going to want to play with them again. Your child may need a little bit more support in interaction with peers. Maybe they need support engaging with peers at all. They're standing on the porch watching the neighbors play, or maybe they actually need a little bit of support with potentially being too much, engaging in play, trying to go out and play with neighbors at 9:30 in the evening or something like that. So that support might look differently depending on where you're at. And finally, oftentimes children are just a little bit more motivated, and you are more motivated to encourage your child to spend time together with their peers. I made it through the bullet point. So you're more motivated to say, hey, look, Danny's outside, you should go play with him. Maybe you don't do that with your other children because they're always playing together. You have a lot more emotional investment in getting them to play with their peers. So the way that you handle the situation is also going to be a little bit different. And it's definitely something to be cognizant of. So we'll talk first about flexibility here. Here are a couple of scenarios that depict some really common, basically barriers that occur during session for us. So scenario one, Lily gets upset when rules are changed during board games. She begins to argue with her siblings and she quits playing when she isn't able to play it her way. This usually results in her siblings finishing the game while Lily goes to her room. This is something that we thought of pretty quickly. It's something that we see pretty frequently, and it's definitely a really common obstacle for some of our kiddos. So we'll take a little bit of time to go over that. So we have board games with rules that are, more or less set in stone. Board games come with a pamphlet of ways to play. Maybe this is a really common issue that I run into. Most board games, something like 90% of board games say the youngest player goes first. So let's say that your child in question is the second youngest, literally never gets to go first. You can encourage flexibility with the entire group to say, hey, Lily never gets to go first. Maybe today Lily can go first, Daniel can go second. Or you can, maybe we have a friend that came over. Lily's usually the youngest, but today her friend Cooper is a little bit younger. Today we're going to let Cooper go first. You always go first. Let's let Cooper try. So we have another scenario. Diego and his brother love to play with toy cars. His brother likes to pretend that they are animals and will make animal sounds when playing. Diego cries whenever this happens and insists on getting the cars from his brother so that he can play with him his way. This is another really common one. This is a little bit more open-ended play. There isn't really a definite destination for any of these play schemes. You know, you're just playing with cars. This can be a real challenge for some of our kiddos. We have a couple solutions on the next slide as well. So basically, we can capture opportunities to practice flexibility in daily situations. Maybe next time Diego's playing with cars, you can have one of the cars, maybe not fly this time, but you can have them do a little jump, you know, or, you know, you can just capture opportunities. Oh, today, you know, you're helping me make cookies. We don't have a spatula. Let's use this big slotted spoon instead. Using a slightly different tool, getting to the same end game, but it looks a little bit differently. We can start small, so we make it bigger, like instead of having cars fly, they just jump. Maybe instead of the car actually being an elephant, maybe just when you toot the horn, it sounds like an elephant. It goes doo instead of going honk, honk. See if that goes a little bit better. And of course, when we are providing praise for being flexible, you really want to catch every single opportunity that you can. Sometimes they're so discreet that it's actually really difficult. But when you are spending the time watching your children play, watching them demonstrate flexibility, hey, Diego let his friend have the car bark like a dog, didn't say anything. That was awesome, Diego. You did such a good job. Let's keep playing. And finally, this can be another bullet point as well. Definitely take some time to kind of ponder when you want to practice this skill and maybe when you kind of want to let it go. So maybe Diego playing with cars, this is kind of a common obstacle. You've seen him accept someone else having a car meow before. Definitely keep practicing that. Maybe tomorrow his friend Cooper wants to, I don't know, sled down his favorite hill on Diego's favorite Captain America shield. The shield might get damaged. It might, you know, something might happen. Maybe that isn't the best time to practice flexibility right now. And nobody's ready for this. There might actually be permanent scars to this whole interaction. So before you prompt for flexibility, definitely just take a moment to understand, you know, the possible outcomes and whether or not you have a feeling that your child is ready for that challenge.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Chelsea. You know, I think those are really, really some great suggestions of, especially the last one, I think can be a little bit challenging for a lot of us, especially us as clinicians, you know, kind of learning. And this is really individualized to the kid too, of, okay, is this an opportunity where the outcome of practicing it is going to be greater than maybe moving forward and kind of letting this go? So yeah, it just takes practice and getting to know your kid, you know, a lot better. So now we're going to move on to cooperation. We have a couple scenarios here as well. In scenario 1, Rita and her friend are building towers with blocks. Rita wants to build a rainbow tower, but her friend wants to build a purple tower. Rita begins building a rainbow tower and does not allow her friend to change it or help her build. This causes them to both become upset. So again, this is a pretty common scenario. You know, sometimes a kid has an idea in mind of building something in a specific way. Maybe that's how they like playing with blocks. You know, they really like rainbows. They want to build it, you know, the colors of the rainbow. But when you have a kid come into the play scenario, they have their own preferences as well, right? So, you know, this can usually cause a little bit of a conflict there, and we can talk about some solutions. In scenario 2, we have Johnny. Johnny is playing monster tag at the park with his friends. He loves tagging and refuses to let someone else be the monster. When it's someone else's turn, he becomes upset and quits playing monster tag. So here we kind of have a similar scenario as in the flexibility one, you know, the rules of the game and wanting to do things a certain way. So in this scenario, Johnny's playing monster tag. He only wants to be the monster. When somebody else wants to be the monster, he's not okay with that, right? So here we have some opportunities to work on cooperation. So we've thought of a few, you know, solutions for that. All right, so a few things that we thought of that we've actually, used when working with our kids in these similar scenarios and have been pretty effective. The first one is using first then. So with first then, we kind of have a situation where the first in the first then is going to be something maybe that they're not really going to want to do, a little bit hesitant about. And then the then in the situation is something that they do want to do and something that they do like. So for example, building the rainbow blocks. Okay, maybe first we let Rita's friend put a couple blocks on, and then you can put your rainbow color blocks on. Or maybe in the monster tag scenario, okay, first, Tina is going to be the monster for one round, and then you can be the monster again. So cooperating in that sense of, okay, we're going to do maybe this one thing that you don't necessarily want to do right now, but after that, you're more than free to kind of go back to what you wanted to do in this scenario. So this kind of goes back to what Chelsea was talking about with flexibility, kind of starting off small and going bigger. So here's a kind of a good way to do that, using that first then, and you can work on slowly increasing that over time. So maybe the first then for tag could be, okay, we're going to do 3 rounds of tags. Someone's going to be the monster, and then you can be the monster. So thinking about building it up with that too. Sensory differences. So this is something that we know a lot of our kids may have difficulties with is, sensory differences in the sense of maybe processing sounds and lights and touch. Maybe in the scenario with monster tag, maybe I forgot his name, Johnny, doesn't like being touched. Maybe that's why he doesn't want to play monster tag or somebody else to be the monster, because maybe he doesn't want to get physically touched. So if you kind of know that about your child, keeping that in mind when you kind of run into these situations, and kind of working around that, right? So maybe you can help them communicate with their peers, hey, I don't want to be touched, but maybe, we can find an alternative kind of tagging thing. Maybe they say something or, throw like a paper at them or paper ball or something, kind of finding those alternatives so that it can work for everyone. And the last one we have is finding ways for all needs to be met when possible. So again, this is any relationship is a two-way street, right? So finding ways to kind of meet in the middle. So for example, with the building blocks, maybe they take turns, right? They're building the rainbow block, and when it comes to purple, Rita's friend can put the purple one on. That's one that Chelsea came up with. I thought it was a really great idea. So kind of finding ways for for everyone involved, for everyone's needs and desires to be met. And of course, keeping in mind, how kind of flexible your child can be in that moment. But of course, always encouraging that cooperation and flexibility.
I was muted. Sorry about that. So we talked about flexibility. We talked about cooperation. Both of these are really challenging for all children, actually. So we can definitely also work on some coping skills side by side to make sure that they have a couple of tools to kind of self-regulate while they're working on these really, really difficult challenges. So we program for coping skills all the time. It's pretty rare to find a program book that doesn't have it in some way or another. Really common examples that we tend to come up with are, hey, let's take a deep breath. How about you ask for a break? Another one that might come into play, especially if you have a kiddo that tends to engage in aggression or sort of talk with their hands a lot, and it just escalates and escalates. You can help them to work on squeezing their hands really tight a couple of times, trying to come back down to earth a little bit. We do have self-talk. I have a friend who definitely, like if I were to do it, he lowers his voice. He goes, okay, Chelsea, take a deep breath. You are strong. And it's actually very cool. By the time he's done, he's smiling. It's great. And another one that is really great for everyone, in my opinion, is just asking for space. Hey, I'm having a hard time. I need you to back up a little bit. I did include a coping skills wheel here. I've used this with a couple of kiddos. It can help them to sort of look at all of the options and see what they want to pick. I have put a spinner on it before. If your child tends to have a little bit of trouble actually choosing one, they're so escalated that they just say, I don't want to, you can take the choice and make it a spinner. Can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes it'll land on maybe their least favorite, like exercise, and then it doesn't go so well. So it can be a good idea to have one or two in your back pocket. I would also definitely keep in mind that what works for you might not work for your child. Deep breaths work for me. Taking a break works for me. I have never actually used self-talk out loud for myself. Doesn't work for me. I've never prescribed it for anybody, but it does help a lot of kids. So definitely keep all of them in mind. Don't be shy, try everything out. Oop. Okay, so let's do a quick exercise. I'll ask you a question and we'll take, I don't know, 20 seconds maybe. You can grab a pen, you can just kind of think about it. What does it look like when your child is becoming upset? A lot of parents will tell me, you know, they can tell, they can feel it. They're in the room, they know they're upset. What does it look like physically? What do you see? What do you hear? Take a couple of seconds to sort of think about that. Ooh, noisy. Definitely something you can hear. Give you a couple more seconds. All right. You've got it. Got a couple more examples here. Tensing body, very good one. Flapping, that can represent a lot of emotions, but definitely comes out when we're starting to escalate sometimes too. So we've separated a lot of really common signs into physical, vocal, and communication. So we'll go over the physical signs first. We have balling hands and fists. That's really common. Body becomes tense. Somebody said that. We have vocal signs, raising voices, threats and accusations. This isn't fair. That doesn't suit me. Like, I don't like that. We have begging. I've definitely seen this, particularly in the game of sorry, like, no, please, let's do a compromise. Don't do that. Communication. Sometimes we have trouble communicating. You kind of lose your words. You start to kind of let your voice come up here and nobody can understand you anymore. Sometimes you shut down completely. You just don't want to play. You just kind of, you know, whatever. I don't care. Go on without me. This game is stupid. You know, we don't really want to talk about how we're feeling right now. These are all really common signs of escalation for all of us to keep in mind when we're watching children play with each other, when we're watching spouses play with each other, sometimes even when we're noticing it in ourselves. So we can talk about teaching coping skills as well. So we'll talk about modeling coping skills. This is something that my parents definitely did when they were teaching me how to drive. You know, both hands on the wheel, someone cuts you off. Maybe don't say anything because Chelsea's watching. Let's take a deep breath instead. Okay, it's gonna be okay. You can absolutely role play with your children. You know, sometimes even outside of a difficult situation. Hey, today we're gonna play with our neighbor Matthew. Sometimes you guys kind of butt heads a little bit. Let's talk about it. Maybe you pretend that Matthew has done something that really bothers you. He wants to be blue and you wanted to be blue. You've been thinking about it all day. What would you do? You know, you can talk about it. You can actually role play it. You can be Matthew and your child can be themselves, or you can reverse roles. This can work really effectively for some kids. Priming also kind of goes into role play. You know, in a couple minutes, Dylan's going to be here. Let's go over what you can do when you're feeling upset. What can we do? You can take a break. What's something else you can do? And what's something else you can do? Ask for help. Take a deep breath. Squeeze your hands. Another thing that can be helpful for a lot of kids is to have visuals. They can have a card that they carry. You can have a sign posted in their bedroom. These are 3 things I can do when I'm upset. I can ask for help. I can take a deep breath. I can wait 5 seconds before I say something back. A couple more pointers. Remember definitely to provide positive feedback whenever they are practicing and using these skills, even if you have to prompt them first sometimes. You know, maybe you're going through the drive-through, they wanted ice cream, it's taking a really long time. If you can see them, you know, demonstrating patience, taking deep breaths, squeezing their hands. Oh my gosh, you're doing such a good job. I know this is frustrating. I'm so proud of you. And definitely, you know, similar to flexibility, we need to start small and work up to the harder things. So when you're first practicing coping skills, there's a really good chance that you're not even going to see some of those signs of escalation, because honestly, you're working on things that aren't 100% a big deal all of the time. So just kind of start small. Hey, we can't find your shoes. Let's wear your Crocs to go outside and check the mail. I know you prefer your shoes. Let's talk about it. Let's use some self-talk right now. I can put my shoes on. This is not a big deal. I'm so proud of you. And then eventually, you know, as we get better over the weeks and the weeks and the weeks, you can definitely present those coping skills, see if they can practice these coping skills when Matthew comes and takes Blue. And it's the worst thing in the world. But you know what? How about you take a deep breath? Let's see if we can kind of manage this. But what I would not do is just throw that really, really difficult, low probability request in the day after we start talking about coping skills. Okay.
Great. So I think, you know, these teaching methods that Chelsea just went over, you can definitely think about using these same methods outside of just prompting coping skills. You know, these can be used for a lot of different skills. I think those are some good ones to keep in mind, especially the priming, you know, letting our kids know what's going to happen, you know, modeling and things like that. They're really, really great procedures to use. So now we're going to go on to setting and modifying goals. So, you know, when we think about setting and modifying goals, you kind of have an idea, right, of where your child's social skill levels are. You know, what are their strengths? What are some areas that they have challenges in? So I think, you know, for you, it would be a good idea to pick maybe 1 to 3 goals for your child. You know, there may be a lot of different areas that they need support in, but I think it's, you know, great to focus on just a couple of things that you know, this makes it easier for the caregiver as well to kind of keep those in their mind when approaching a social interaction with a sibling or a peer. You know, having those couple of things that you have in your mind so that you can kind of consistently, you know when they're happening and, you know, continuing to work on them. So some examples we have here for picking goals. You know, I would like for my child to be able to play with another child in a different room, right? So sometimes some of our kids have difficulty, you know, working on, you know, those social interactions on their own. You know, it is a big goal to be able to work up to, okay, you can go in the living room. I'm going to be in my room. I'm going to, you know, hang out in my room for a few minutes, and not, you know, have to worry about, okay, what's going to go on over there. Right. So that could be a great goal that you can work up to. So maybe you start off, you know, sitting next to them. You know, this could also be, you know, a scenario where, you know, maybe your kid is very attached to you, right? And kind of, you know, their stress levels kind of go up if you leave the room. It's something that you can work up to. So maybe you start up sitting next to them, and then maybe, you know, over time, you can kind of, okay, you're going to be sitting on the couch now. Okay, you're going to be in the kitchen, but they can see you. Okay, now I'm going to start moving to the room. You know, again, starting off small and then working up. Another example would be, I want my child to finish a board game, right? So socialization goals can be important for that family time, right? So maybe necessarily, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, your kid likes the board game, right? I think firstly, it would be identifying maybe a board game that they can enjoy, can tolerate, and wouldn't mind playing. But then beyond that, you know, that being a goal of, okay, I know in order for them to finish this board game with us, we probably need to work on, these coping skills. So we're going to work on these coping skills around this board game time. And that's going to be our goal, just to finish the board game. And we all get to hang out as a family with friends and peers and things like that. Another goal is I wish my child could share their toys. So this is a really big one. For a lot of kids, it's really, really tough to share toys, especially if, they're really attached to specific toys, or maybe a peer's coming over to their house and those are their set of toys, that can be a lot more difficult. So with that one, sharing toys, keeping in mind that, what we talked about in the beginning about expectations, maybe some toys we don't work on sharing, right? Maybe this is just a toy that you have, that's your toy, and maybe kind of structuring some boundaries around that. But then the toys that you have identified would be good for sharing. That can be a really great goal that you can work up to as well. So maybe working on, maybe the friend brings over a toy that they can switch, right? That would be an exciting opportunity for the kid. And that could really help, work up towards that goal of sharing their toys. So now we're going into independence, identifying opportunities for independence. So, we kind of thought out a list of questions that we use when working with our kids to increase independence. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself really when thinking about the goals that you have set and how to identify opportunities to reach that goal. So the first one is, have you been working on this skill? So is this a skill that has kind of been ongoing in progress? If so, that might be a good skill to kind of think about specifically targeting, because it's something that they may already have, some exposure to and be a little bit more comfortable, kind of challenging a bit more. What have recent opportunities to practice the skill looked like? So, if you have a skill that you've been working on, for example, maybe you have been working on sharing toys. If you're kind of in a place where you're like, okay, so and so has been coming over and they, my kid does well sharing their toy, if I'm there to give them a replacement toy, right? So thinking about those recent opportunities, okay, well, how did it go last time that you gave them that replacement toy? Did it go good? Was it really challenging for them? If it was really challenging, okay, maybe we'll do that a few more times, right? Maybe we'll give opportunity for that to become an easier skill for them before building up. If it was something that was really successful, then that might be a good opportunity to think about that next step, right? So maybe you're not there handing it to them, but maybe another toy is accessible right next to them so they can kind of reach for it on their own. So thinking about that, what have these opportunities, how have they turned out in the past? And what is the next step I can make to kind of get my, fade my support a little bit more here? The next question is, does my child have goals related to this skill? So if they do have goals related to that skill, then that would be, if they currently, maybe they are in a ABA program that's targeting, working on skills in these social areas. And if they do have goals related to that skill, maybe that's something you could work on, at home in the community, because those skills are going to overlap and work together. Thinking, what would happen if I do or if I don't prompt them right now? So this is a really tricky one. Chelsea and I were talking about a term we call over prompting, right? Sometimes we're so eager to make sure the social opportunity goes well, so we kind of jump in, right? We're jumping in and kind of guiding them along the way, which is great, but it doesn't really give our kids enough of that opportunity to kind of practice it on their own. So that's a really good question that you can ask yourself, okay, what would happen if I did or didn't prompt right now? If I did prompt right now, would that, be more helpful to them, or would that maybe not give them as much of an opportunity to try this out on their own? Or if I don't prompt right now, would that be good, or would that maybe lead to them getting upset, right? So maybe it's time that I jump in and kind of give them some coping skills in that moment. So it's about kind of thinking it out, and you're not always going to get it right. I don't always get it right, and that's okay. It's a learning process for everyone, and kind of your child the best, and you can kind of determine, and thinking about those those other questions that we talked about, as well as now you've identified what does it look like when they're becoming upset, right? If you're catching on to that, maybe it would be a good opportunity to kind of help them with that. And then the last question we have is, how will my assistance affect my child's peer relationships? So this is something to keep in mind as well. If you are kind of jumping in, how is that going to affect your kid's relationship with their peers, right? Maybe it gets kind of uncomfortable for the peer if you just keep jumping in. So thinking about that as well. Would it be better if, my kid has that opportunity there? Maybe they're going to struggle a little bit, but you know what? That's okay. They're going to, get that opportunity, and that's going to give them a chance to just be alone with that peer in the moment, and, kind of try that out. So then we are moving on to fading prompts. So I talked about that over prompting and how important it is to identify whether or not it's an opportunity where you can jump in and give those prompts. Some options for decreasing those prompts, so decreasing that support, you can plan out when you will prompt. So maybe if you're the kind of person that likes to have a set plan, I know I am, I really like, having kind of like a formula I can kind of base it off of. Maybe you want to think about, okay, maybe every other opportunity, I'll provide support. Last time I provided support, maybe this time I'm not as much, right? Maybe after X amount of minutes, maybe, after a couple of minutes, then I will start kind of moving away. Just to start it off, I'll give them more support, and then I'll start fading out a little bit more. You can do like a check-in and go from there. So you can plan some check-ins, okay, every 5 minutes, I'm just going to hop in and do a little check-in, see how it's going, and then see if they need a little bit more support. If not, then I'm going to wait another 5 minutes to do my next check-in. And then decreasing your presence. So I think in the end, the goal for everyone is for your child to develop these peer and sibling relationships on their own, them being able to play together on their own. So really thinking about your presence as well, how you can kind of decrease that there, which I know can be a little difficult, maybe a little tricky, but I think it definitely is important to give them those moments to be alone and kind of work through some things together.
Okay, so that covers all 4 of our major points, but we do have some reminders to kind of keep in mind afterwards. First of all, it's totally okay if socializing looks a little different for your child. It's okay if it doesn't look the way that you played with your friends as a kid, or how your other children are playing with their peers. As long as everyone is happy, your child is having a good time, their friends are having a good time, that's perfectly okay, even if it looks a little bit differently. Progress has its ups and downs. I was telling Monica, I actually have one of my best friends is also a BCBA. He tattooed on his body a variable upward trend, a line graph that goes boop, 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 boop. It's not a straight line. Sometimes we're having a great day. We're ready for Matthew to come over and take those blue pieces. It's going to be totally fine. Maybe the next day we have the sniffles, or dad's on a business trip, or you know what, we just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and we don't know why. So it's going to look a little bit worse, even though yesterday was so good. That's so normal, and it's totally okay. Practicing and modeling skills as much as possible is so important. We did touch on that in coping skills, modeling coping skills, practicing them both inside and outside of scenarios that actually do sort of cause that stress. But, practicing and modeling flexibility, practicing and modeling cooperation, catching yourself maybe when you have a little trouble, maybe little Jimmy always wants to help you make dinner, but you're always like, oh, one time he put too much pepper in and he ruined it. Maybe you can also yourself sort of practice and model a little bit of cooperation. Maybe Jimmy isn't going to do pepper this time, but he can absolutely, stir in the bowl. That's something he's great at. So, practicing and modeling that as much as possible whenever you can bring it in is so beneficial. Welcome the challenges. It's a learning experience for everybody. So, you try to plan, let's practice coping skills on something easy. Eventually we'll do it on something hard. Life doesn't always respect that. Sometimes a big challenge will sort of pop up right in your face, maybe on day 3, and there isn't much you can do, but definitely, just welcome it, see what happens. Maybe your child is escalating a little bit, about to sort of fight with her sister. She goes, well, that's not fair. I don't like that. Maybe you can wait 5 or 10 seconds before you say anything and just see if they sort of figure it out. It's a challenge for your child. It's a challenge for yourself. It's really scary. But it definitely is a learning experience, even if it goes terribly. If it goes terribly, okay, well, little Chelsea is not ready for that, obviously. And that's a learning experience for you. And finally, it's okay if you don't get it right, if you don't get it right every time. I said progress has its ups and downs for your children. Progress has its ups and downs for you too. Sometimes you catch yourself over prompting and you go, oh my God, how long have I been doing that? Sometimes you think your child is totally ready and it turns out maybe they needed just one more little half step in between. Or, the neighbors come over unexpectedly and, well, you can't help them right now. You have a business call that you need to be a part of. It's totally okay to not get it right and get it perfect and do everything that's possible every single time. If you've had a really bad day, work didn't go well, you couldn't find your right shoes, just any of them, tonight's not the night to let Jimmy help you with dinner. And that's okay. You can try it another time. Okay, and now, unless Monica, you had anything else to mention, we are ready for your questions.
And just a reminder to everybody, if you do have questions, just put them in the chat box and we can see them pop up there because all the attendees are muted. So you can just put questions in the chat. I know we've gotten a couple questions and comments as we've gone along, but if you do have any other questions, now's the time. And just while we're kind of waiting for a few moments there, I will remind you also that the webinar is recorded. I'll post it on the MeBe Family website and the MeBe Family YouTube channel, and I will send you an email with those links tomorrow as well. I don't see any questions coming through yet, so we'll give everybody a chance here if anybody else wants to ask any questions. I think that was a great presentation. I have 2 young kids, and so I'm like, I am going to print out that coping wheel and we will be using that. It was very helpful. So
very cool.
Yeah,
I always found like it's kind of for the every kid. Like I know a lot of kids that absolutely would not entertain at least 2 of the things on that wheel. So
Yeah.
definitely interested to hear how it goes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different options you can find online as well. If you just Google coping wheel or coping skills, there's a lot of different visuals. I find that really helps my kids as well, as having that visual and even having them join in creating it. They're a lot more likely to be willing to try it if they're involved in the creation of the coping skills visual.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can always put Post-its over the ones they don't like.
Okay, we do have a question coming in here. Okay, what other techniques can we use with no language apart from body language? Or not using cue cards for a 3-year-old?
Okay.
Could you maybe give an example of the particular situations you're thinking about? Is it pertaining to social skills, cooperation or coping skills? I think that would maybe help us come up with some examples. Unless Chelsea, you thought of anything.
I think the last comment came on when we were mentioning coping skills. I do have a couple of children where the first thing that I teach them when they don't have language, coping skills around other children, they're definitely going to rely on you a little bit more. I know that you were offering a couple of like basically the signs of escalation for your child. They are going to rely on you a little bit more. One of the first things that I teach some of my children that are not speaking yet is how to tell you no without engaging in a tantrum or anything like that. So sometimes that just kind of looks like, oh, do you want this? And just very gently pushes it away, gets up and walks away, looks to you, or basically just communicating that they don't like something without having a tantrum. So it could look like getting up and leaving. It can look like just pushing objects away. It can look like pushing themselves back a little bit. But if your child is able to tell you no in their own way, that's a really great building block. I know it doesn't always work so well with other 3-year-olds. Sometimes they don't pick up on social cues very well, but definitely being on top of the situation and pushing others and pulling hair. Interesting. So, I mean, for that, typically, I mean, of course, it's on you to kind of know that they're going to, and we can always block them. We can definitely sort of teach an incompatible solution to that, like getting up and walking away. We can still work on taking a break. You can use a break card, or if you don't want to use a visual cue, this is the sign for break. It looks like holding a stick and breaking it. Break. Let's stand up. Let's come over here. Let's play with a different toy now. We don't have to play with this if it's causing trouble. I think knowing what I know about this situation, I would probably rely a lot on, understanding their body language, transitioning to new toys, and basically being able to move away from that context without the aggression. So taking a break, or pushing things away, standing up and leaving, anything that doesn't involve harming another child. But hopefully that gives you a little bit to go off of. I know that that's a very common suggestion.
Yeah, I have some suggestions as well. I know Chelsea mentioned incompatible behaviors. So, they can't push others and pull hair at the same time if they're doing something else with their hands. So maybe trying to teach a coping skill that involves their hands specifically, such as having maybe like a squeezing item, something like that, that can help them calm down, but it also doesn't really give them the opportunity to engage in those other, kinds of behaviors like pulling hair and pushing others. And I do see that you said that sounds good. Using distraction, often it happens when she is overwhelmed. Yeah, so I think, kind of identifying what about the situation is overwhelming to her, and kind of thinking about ways that you can kind of minimize that for her. So maybe it's too loud, right? Kind of helping her communicate those things, right? Even if, she is 3 years old, she's very, very young. So even if she's not fully understanding it, helping her get that communication so that she can at least tell someone, hey, I'm getting overwhelmed right now. So yeah, I would kind of think about what's going on in those situations that kind of has her, getting worked up.
Definitely. I would also, I mean, if you have a sense of how long it takes for her to get overwhelmed, if it's more of a duration thing, we've been sharing for 10 minutes and that's a long time and I'm frustrated now. You can always try to limit the amount of time. Maybe she's guaranteed to have fun sharing blocks with her friend for 5 minutes. Maybe once 5 minutes are up, let's put away the blocks and transition to something else so that we can have blocks be 100% a good experience. Once she's done that for a couple weeks in a row, you can increase maybe to 7 minutes and then 9 minutes. And then we'll start to kind of push on it and see if maybe she just kind of needs support with letting us know that she's done sharing in that way and capturing opportunities that went extremely well. So she can come into contact with, that was such a fun play date. Wouldn't you like to do that again?
Any other questions, comments?
It's hard to increase experiences with all the social distancing and everything that's been happening. But I definitely commend you for going out on purpose and trying to create these interactions. It's a challenge for everybody, but so good for our kids.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I thank you everybody for your interaction tonight, answering the questions and providing comments. And we really appreciate you staying with us tonight and tomorrow afternoon in New Zealand. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us tonight. Like I said, I'll post the webinar recording so you can always reference it back. And also feel free to reply back to the email that I'll send to you if you do have other questions or want some more information. We will be setting up a webinar for October as well, and that will be posted onto our website. Make sure you also follow MeBe Family on Instagram or Facebook, whatever platform you use, to get all of the latest information and see the latest webinars. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.